Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, commanding staff, and thank you for your service. You guys do a great job, and thank you to all the police officers.
Thank you so much.
I had some general questions I just wanted to ask, and that is, I want to follow up on Councilman Taubenberger's question on the court appearances. And I understand the last police contract mandated that officers who do not receive notice at least 48 hours in advance of the time they're directed to appear for a required court appearance, other than a preliminary hearing scheduled for the date the officer is not scheduled to work, be paid a minimum of 4 hours of overtime at a rate of 2.5 times the employee's regular rate. Is that something that we're discussing with the district attorney to kind of get away from that program? And I know other jurisdictions, I think, are using video conferencing and Skyping and so forth, and maybe we could look to those as far as saving some money.
We have had initial meetings with the new district attorney. It was very, very productive in the fact that we all agree that it's a necessary need to look to reduce the number of people subpoenaed for court as well as the duration. So last year was the first year since, I guess, the initial contract that we've really started to see the reduction in the double time and a half, where officers are now being notified in a timely manner to just not have them paid. We probably a 15 or 20% reduction. Would like to see it go down further, but part of the last contract required officers to be able to be reached and notified for court, and that was a condition that they would have to have a number and give a number. But it's very, very important to have the right officers there, but not every officer there. So I saw the commitment, and this meeting included the public defender's office as well as the district attorney, police, and financial folks to kind of work at just looking at the way they do business, scrapping the whole way of how it's always been in the past, that if there's 12 officers on a case, they get subpoenaed, instead of saying, well, who will we really need today, and really start to streamline it, not only from the overtime perspective, but as the commissioner said, the point of having officers available who are on day work too, being able to work and serve in those districts.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, if I were to ask you today, your 3 biggest challenges as the commissioner of our police department, how would you respond to that?
In no particular order, even though, people could claim order, but for me, gun violence, police community relations, and the opioid crisis, without question. All 3 are issues that we're working on. Certainly the opioid thing transcends this city. While not every city in the nation is dealing with this type of crisis, many are. Clearly, we have a commitment from several police officers in the form of their training, and they've administered naloxone successfully, as well as the fire department, our partners, but it's something that is a very difficult issue to deal with. Gun violence is arguably one of the most intractable issues that we're contending with. And there's nothing more frustrating than, for example, there are police districts who, we're down in homicides this year, but the ebb and flow that we deal with is totally confounding and frustrating. And that, last year it was East Division that was the most challenging, even at this point in the year, yet to this point they're down significantly. But conversely, I have districts that have cropped up, and they may not be completely out of kilter with regard to numbers, but it's just a frustration. We have, as you all know in this body, 21 districts that make up 6 police divisions. And unlike some cities where, you'll hear about the south and west side or southwest side of Chicago in certain places, we have to be very mindful of gun violence in all 6 police divisions. Granted, not in all 21 districts, but in all 6 police divisions. And so you can imagine the challenges that poses for resource allocation. And so this staff works tirelessly, and I do mean tirelessly, on this issue. Everybody from this table to the folks behind me and the folks in the field that all of you know, they're on these phones all the time. It is not a reactive thing in that, something happens, we don't wait until the next day to start discussing it, particularly if we're seeing what is usually indicative of most problems we deal with, which is retaliatory violence. And lastly, with regard to police-community relations, that will be an ongoing endeavor. We will never reach a pinnacle of success. I mean, because as long as you have certain neighborhoods who feel disenfranchised, either by us or by the system, then we have work yet to do. And so there's no celebrating to be done, despite all the wonderful work that's done on the part of both the men and women who are commanders out there, but also the men and women on the ground who do great work. But we know that as long as you have people who either A, don't feel safe, or don't feel comfortable interacting with police, then there's a lot of work to do. Look, we are an organization, when you account for civilians, well over 7,000 folk, close to 8,000 plus people. We're flawed individuals just like everybody else. But I can tell you that I am so proud to lead this organization and the men and women in it who give their heart and soul and work very hard. But those three things, Councilman, and I could have named a list of probably 10, but you asked for 3. And so those are 3 that are probably the most prevalent in terms of things we deal with each and every day and work on and try to build on and make them better.
Thank you. Let me just address 2 of the 3 things. The homicides in your report, I think you said 307 last year.
317.
317, okay.
Right.
And Commissioner Farley, I think, told us that there were 1,260 opioid deaths last year. And I think he also mentioned in the 90s, at the height of the AIDS epidemic, we had 950 people die from AIDS in the 90s. So clearly the opioids is a huge issue. I'm just curious, I'm trying to understand how so many drugs are in Philadelphia and are available. Do you have any idea of, are there like 5 or 6 big drug dealers who are selling to smaller drug dealers that are then distributing them? Or can you explain how the drugs are coming into our city?
So it's a very, very complicated issue. First, some of you may or may not know that heroin in this city has been some of the purest in the nation for years. It's not even new. But with the introduction of fentanyl, it makes it even more deadly than it's ever been before. This is kind of a hub, where we're situated in the city, in the country, between Baltimore and New York City. It makes it, a place that is conducive sometimes for trafficking. We have some very, very difficult issues we contend with where now a lot of our markets are, I guess you would say, displaced. You could use any number of other words, where they're not as hierarchical as maybe they used to be, which may have lent itself to controlling even some violence. We know that for some time now that there are drug markets where people are renting corners, particularly in East Division, that live nowhere near there, which also does not help. And here's another reality, and it's just kind of an unintended consequence of the things we do in the business we're all in. The more you talk about things sometimes, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, the more people gravitate to it. And so the more it gets national attention about the purity of heroin in Philadelphia, the more people want to come here. I had an instance when, over in the library in East Division that was talked about for a long, long time now, where I was out there and I was talking to a sergeant who administered naloxone to a gentleman, and he noticed the gentleman's ID indicated he was from New York City. And after, the revival, he asked this man, well, why are you here? Aren't there drugs and heroin in New York City? And his answer was, yes, they are, but they're better here. And so think about, the issues you got to contend with, where someone's willing to jump on a train to come down here and take heroin. And all the issues that those poor individuals who live in those neighborhoods have to contend with. And so there's a lot of work to do in that regard, but the heroin trafficking is kind of a little different than it was before, but it is something that is a major issue that we've got to get our arms around.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Council President.